Hi everyone, this is the video for our transformations of functions unit, but we're on objective 2, and I'm going to walk you through the guided notes. So objective 2 is all about this thing called inverse. We want to find the inverse of a function. So I know you don't see the word inverse anywhere on this slide, but if you notice on these tables that are blank, there is the symbol. It looks very similar to our function symbol f of x, but there's a -1 in the exponent, and it's over here as well. That is the symbol for inverse. So even though it's not saying inverse on this page, the symbol f -1 parentheses x is the symbol for inverse. So what an inverse function is, it's the opposite. It's the opposite of something. So if I'm giving you a table and I'm asking for the inverse table, I'm asking for the opposite table. Same thing, I'm giving you a graph. I'm asking for the inverse graph. I want the opposite graph. And then on slide 2, I'll be giving you an equation and I want the opposite equation, the inverse equation. So that's what we're doing for each of these examples. The number one rule of finding the inverse, I don't care if it's a table, if it's a graph, if it's an equation, you always are going to flip your x value and your y value. That's what you're going to do always to find the inverse. So let's start off easy and kind of progress to a little bit harder. So the first thing is I'm giving you a table. Here are all your x values. Here are all your y values. I'm asking for the inverse. Remember, the rule is just switch your x and y. So my first point is 0, 17. I'm going to flip it. So it's going to become 17, 0. Second point is 123. I'm going to flip it. It's going to become 23, 1, and so on. 229 is going to be 29 and 2. 335 is going to become 35 and 3. So tables are easy. You just simply flip those x and y's. These are opposite or inverse tables of each other. Okay. Graphs are a little bit harder, but we're still going to use tables to help us, so it'll be along the same lines. Here I'm giving you a line, and I want you to graph the inverse line. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to pull out some points from this line. So when I look at this graph, I want to look at where does this line clearly cross points. So I'm going to make it a little bit bigger just for the sake of this video. So we want to see where does this line, what points does this line go through? So like, for example, I'm seeing this green line go through the point 0, 1. It's a very clear intersection. So I'm going to put the point 0, 1. We want to find 3 more points. Here, I see this green line go through the point 1, 3. Another very clear point. Really, you can pick out any points you want. I'm going to go the opposite way. Right here is a very clear point at -1, -1, -1, -1. And then last, we have a clear point at -2, -3. Okay, so start by just pulling out some very clear points you see. Now we're going to do what we know. We're given a table. Let's flip all of our points to get the inverse table. So again, 0, 1 is going to become 1, 0. 3 is going to become 3, 3, 1. Sorry about that. -1, -1. If you flip that, that's just going to be the same thing, right? -1, -1. And then -2, -3 is going to become -3, -2. We still don't have an inverse graph. We don't have an opposite graph. But we can graph these points and it will make a graph that's the opposite of our original. So let's do that. My first point was 1, 0. I'm going to grab this blue point and put it at 1, 0. 3, 1 over 3 up 1. -1, -1. That's easy enough. And then last, -3, -2. And here we have a line, -3, -2 is here. We have a line, that's a graph, and this would be the opposite of our original. It doesn't look, lines are a little bit harder because they're not, they're straight lines. They're not super special, but these are inverse graphs. They're opposites. So if you're given a graph, make sure you pull out points. Maybe even on the quiz, you're not going to have tables necessarily. Maybe even write these points down, flip them in order to find your new graph. Okay. Second or third type of inverse I'm going to ask of you is the equation. Now, the equations are definitely the hardest, but it's really still sticking to that same rule, flip your x and y. So here's my equation, y equals 2x plus 1. We're going to act like this line in our table is going straight down from your equal sign. So there is a left side of your equation and there is a right side. And I'm telling you what our steps to solving equations are over here on the very left. So the first step, you're going to flip your variables. So instead of y equals, I'm going to put x on this side. And instead of 2x plus 1, it's going to be 2y plus 1. So we just started with our first step, flip x and y. Okay, now we need to solve for y. We need to get y by itself. So we have to get rid of this plus 1 and we have to get rid of this 2. Hopefully you know these steps to solving equations. If not, I have helpers. The first step to solving an equation is the distributive property, or if you see parentheses. I do not see parentheses here, so I do not have to use the distributive property and I don't have to rewrite it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to color out these steps because I know I don't have to use them. Okay. Next, it says combine like terms. Well, there's nothing to really combine here. 2y plus 1, I can't put those together. One has a letter, one doesn't. So I also cannot do the step. So I'm going to color it out. Next, undo addition or subtraction. Now here I can do something. I want to get rid of this plus 1. I have to undo it. So the opposite of plus 1 is minus 1. And whatever you do to one side of the equation, you have to do to the other side to keep it balanced with that equal sign. Okay? So the plus 1 and the minus 1, they cancel out. And so all I'm left with when I rewrite is a 2y. And then on my left side, I have an x minus 1. I can't put those together. Again, one's a letter, one's a number. So I'm going to keep it as x minus 1. Last, I have to get rid of this 2. And it doesn't look like it explicitly, but this is saying 2 times y. So I want to undo that multiplication. And how I undo multiplication is by division. So I'm going to divide by 2 to get rid of that 2. But again, I have to do it on both sides. So 2y divided by 2 is going to be y. And then watch how I write this next step. I have x minus 1 divided by 2. I'm going to want to keep that x minus 1 together, but then I'm dividing it by 2. Right? So we've just solved for y. That we're actually done. We just like to write it where the y comes first. So y equals x minus 1 divided by 2. This right here is the inverse equation of this. The only thing we really did was flip our x and y and then just solve this equation like we normally solve equations, the same steps. All right, let's do one more together. So let's go to slide 3. This says y equals 3, parentheses x minus 10. Okay, I'm going to flip my variable. So instead of the y equal, I'm going to put an x. And instead of the 3 parentheses x minus 10, I'm going to do 3 parentheses y minus 10. Just switch that x and y. Now, instead of skipping the distributive property, I'm actually going to use it because I see parentheses. Now, if you remember, the distributive property is taking the number out front, 3, and multiplying it by everything inside the parentheses. So I'm going to first do 3 times y. I'm going to keep that minus sign, and then I'm going to do 3 times 10. I'm going to take the 3 and multiply it by everything inside. Okay. Now let's rewrite. We saw that x, 3 times y is 3y. And then 3 times 10 is 30. So this right here looks very similar to this problem where you have something being added or subtracted and something like a number out front. So combining like terms, I can't do. That is not a part of this. And so let's start by getting y by itself. So let's get rid of this minus 30. The opposite of minus 30 is going to be a plus 30. I have to do it on both sides. Minus 30 plus 30 cancel out. I'm left with a 3y. And then just like before, I can't put those together, so it's going to be x plus 30. Last thing, to get rid of that 3, we're going to divide by 3, and we're going to do it on both sides. These 3's cancel out. I have a y, and then remember, we want to keep x plus 30 together, and then divide it by 3. We have solved for y. Let's put it first. X plus 30 divided by 3. Here is your inverse equation of the original. So the only thing extra we had to do was distribute, but then all the rest of the steps were the same. So we have just went over how to find the inverse of tables, of graphs, and now equations. You're ready for your quiz. What I will say, if you notice, I put slides 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. These are just blank slides. If you get a problem that's asking for the inverse of an equation, you can use paper and pencil if you want, or I have left these extra slides in here for you to use. Just put your equation, whatever the quiz asks you about, put the equation up here and then go through your steps. That's if you want. These are just extra blank slides for you to use. You don't have to. I do think it makes it easier. So, yeah, good luck on the quiz for objective 2.